why don't we go ahead and get started? So, Dianne, why don't you introduce
Sure.
yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and why why I reached out to you for help, or why you're qualified for
Yeah.
that.
So I am Dianne Keck. I am the owner of NeuroDog
Why I reached
Training.
out to you for help, or
Um,
why?
and I'm getting just a little bit of feedback too where I can hear us talking. So I'm not sure if there's a way to fix that, but just thought I would mention it quick. I own NeuroDog Training, and so I do a lot of dog training for both companion family pets, family dogs, as well as service and therapy dogs. And I also do some work with dogs who are fearful of new people, dogs, things like that. So I have a pretty diverse caseload of clients, but I do work a lot kind of in those areas. And then I also teach Let's Get Them Pressing for Fluent Pet with my co-teacher, Alexis Devine. And so that's something that we offer as well to help people to get started with button pressing when they're a little bit newer to the journey. So that's something that I really enjoy doing as well. That's in a group format that we offer. It's a 5-week class, and we just kicked off our latest cohort, and I think we'll have actually just had some pretty relevant conversation on Tuesday that I think applies really nicely to what we're going to talk about today. And I'm really grateful to you, Robin, for hosting this today. I think it's incredibly generous that you wanted to share this conversation and the things that we were talking about together with more people so that it can hopefully help more folks. So I'm really grateful to you, and I think it's very generous of you, and I'm looking forward to diving into the conversation.
Awesome, thanks, Heather. Welcome as well. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your learner?
My learner's name is Senna. He is a newly 3-year-old border collie who loves nothing more in the world than to play tug and to play other kinds of play. Um, I do social media for Fluent Pet, and you might know me as Senna Speaks or the Fluent Pet account.
Great. Thanks, Heather. I really appreciate you being here today. So let's dive in. So, Diane, I reached out because Bert has been spamming buttons lately, and he will press the full menu of items. He will press topple, he will press bully stick, he will press bone, and I will present those items to him, and he will turn his nose up and be like, "What on earth were you thinking, Mom? Um, this was not what I was looking for." But then he will go immediately back to the button board and then he will press topple again. And I will again present the topple. And I was working with my local trainer and she said, maybe we need to make it more interesting for him. But I want you to definitely reach out to somebody who's got experience with the buttons and is a trainer because I don't want to discourage his button use. I don't want him to get frustrated and not use his buttons anymore because it has provided him so much agency and so many other benefits. So we want to make sure we develop a plan that works and helps him. So we wanted to dive into this bigger picture of his whole life and what does his whole life look at and what is he really trying to communicate with me through these presses, because I know he knows what the topple button means. I know he knows what the button means. It's and he didn't suddenly forget that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of why this might have started happening.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing to talk about and to create some framing about at the beginning of this conversation, because I think so often people have the idea that we unbox the buttons, we give the animal the buttons, and then we sort of program the meaning of the buttons into the animal, and then there's just sort of this static, permanent quote understanding of what the buttons are. But we have to remember that we are constantly co-creating the function of the buttons. So what matters when our learners are pressing is what happens after they press. That's the most important part. So it's the outcome of the pressing that is going to establish the function or the meaning of that particular button. And so to your point, I agree. I don't think that he forgot the meaning of the buttons, but I do think that we have to remember as teachers that we are typically, unless maybe there's one or two or three people in our household, we are generally the only partner that our animal is using the buttons with. So we are the only listener, so to speak. And so what that means is that we are the only one who is providing uh, responses or acting upon the things that the animal is pressing. And so in that way, we are constantly helping to either reinforce or develop potentially new meaning, right? So we're continuously co-creating function together with our learner, right? So you and I, for example, and Heather, we go out into the world and we have many, many, many conversation partners throughout the day. You are using words on social media platforms. When you're listening to people speak, you talk to many different people at work. And so you are being reinforced for a particular meaning by hundreds of people every day, right? There's an agreed upon function to these words. Whereas for our animals, it's a much more limited audience. It's a much more limited amount of listeners that they have to be creating those functional outcomes. So I think that's just one thing that's really important. I think that's some very important framing to have when we talk about this. So when we look at a dog or an animal like Bert who is pressing the button, topple or walk or whatever that might be, and it seems like the outcome, right, when you provide that is not satisfying, rather than looking at that as the abstraction or the word topple itself, we want to look at that as behavior, right? And so he is communicating something to us, right? The combination of the pressing and then his subsequent behavior after we deliver that reinforcement, he is communicating something. And I think his communication was pretty effective because you went to two different trainers and you were able to get some great advice, I think, from your local trainer, who I'm really appreciative to collaborate with. And I think that they had great advice for you. And then also they had, the wonderful wisdom to say, let's also bring in somebody who is knowledgeable about using the buttons as well, so that we can kind of collaborate together on a plan for him. So I think that's really wonderful. And I think that it's also wonderful that his communication was so effective, right? In that he got you to do the things that he needed. And so
Yeah.
then what we did was we started with the environment. We started where we always start, right? We look at the environment. And I
Yeah.
can
And
stop there if you and Heather have things you want to interject before we get into our sort of environmental analysis.
I just want to pop in. There was a question. Does he need a new button? Is that why he's pressing? And I think I think where we're going next will kind of answer that question. But the answer is probably maybe, but not necessarily.
Maybe.
Um, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, maybe. I think that it really depends on the environment. I think that what we ended up talking about was we really did kind of a thorough examination of his environment, right? So his
Mm-hmm.
exercise schedule, his enrichment, sort of how the flow of the day looks, um, things that might be going on immediately preceding these quote spamming moments, right? We looked at potential consequences, like what happens after, right? What happens besides you delivering the topple? What also happens in addition to that? What happens after you deliver the topple and it's unsatisfying, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
were looking at all of those things. And I think that in some cases, absolutely, you're going to have animals who do need a different button. But I think that we also want to have some evidence for what button we would add, right? If the answer is, yeah, they do need another button, I think in the specific case of Bert, it wasn't clear what button would have been satisfying, right? And so we
Right.
really needed to look at all of the environmental variables. And then we kind of started talking through, you and I, we also talked with Janine, we talked with some other folks. And so I think that um, in a lot of cases, for a lot of folks who are listening to this, yeah, the answer may be the animal needs more options. And I definitely think that that is the case when we have a learner who is maybe 5 to 15 buttons in, and then they're going through that initial sort of spamming phase. And oftentimes in that phase, the answer is, yeah, we need to start adding more, right? They need more options. They need to be able to experiment with things. We need to be able to experiment with things. But I think in Bert's case, where he already had a lot of buttons,
About about
he,
80. Yeah.
right, about 80. Great, thank you. Um, I think that certainly maybe yes, adding some buttons, but I don't think that that was the whole answer. And I think that our conversation together revealed that just sort of indiscriminately adding more buttons was not necessarily the answer, and that it was more helpful to do a more thorough environmental analysis and then decide what we might want to add.
Yeah, definitely. And with his iliosis strain, which is his hip flexor muscle for those that are not in the vet tech world, um, it's been difficult to get him the exercise that would really wear him out. We really can't walk more than a half a mile, so we have to be really creative with how we're providing. When I say we, I guess I mean me and Ernie are providing his enrichment. So Ernie certainly does enrich him. They are quite the pair.
Ernie is
Um,
Robin's cat.
yes, Ernie is my cat. So um, they're a great pair. But yes, it's been a challenge to get those walks in, and then I had a little bout of pneumonia, so I couldn't do any activity. So he was definitely understimulated in the exercise department. So we talked about sniff spots. And when we go to sniff spots, one of my challenges is he just stands next to me. He doesn't want to explore. So you had some suggestions there.
Well, I have to tell you, I was fresh off of hiking with Rad and Cash. And when we were hiking, we were up in Flagstaff, which is a mountain town in Arizona. And there was still just a little bit of snow on the ground high up in the mountains, which was delightful, very novel and delightful for both Cash and my son. And one of the things that I had observed there is that, um, you know, the Cash's guardian Rad had mentioned, he doesn't do a ton of like, you know, sticks and then rolling and then digging, and all this kind of stuff. And so in any case, we were trying to encourage just sort of exploratory behavior of these little snow piles. And so um, my son, of course, children are incredibly wise and wonderful teachers. And so he had taken some sticks and he just started modeling, like digging in the snow. And Cash immediately was like, yeah, of course, and then they were just going to town. And it was just such an enjoyable, I think, and reinforcing uh, sight to watch the two of them doing that together. And so, and certainly, we have used that, in other instances. I know that I've also seen a very delightful video of Alexis modeling sniffing for her dog Tenrak. Um, and so one of the things that I had suggested was that you could actually go around and model, like looking in the bushes, or modeling some of those behaviors, demonstrating some curiosity about the environment, right? um, because he is reluctant to engage with the environment, and he wants to be close to you, right? And you are very reinforcing to him. So anyway, we had talked about that, and I am anxiously awaiting my update on on if you have done this or not.
I have not yet, but plan to do that in the near future. So the update and probably video will be coming.
I'm sure the audience will be looking forward to a video of you showing your dog how to sniff the bushes. Because I know I am.
Yeah, it
Same.
will
But I
be.
think there's other things you can do too, right? So you can strategic treat placement, right? So you may be able to like toss the treat into the bushes, right?
Hmm.
And that's gonna, that might entice the dog to initially go into the bushes for the treat or that contrived reinforcer, but then they might discover some naturally occurring reinforcers, right? Some leaves or some sniffs or, some scents that are in there. Maybe there's a stick under there, right? So I
Right.
think that there are other things that we can do as well, but I think it is good to talk about, you know, some of these other ways that we can model. And I know that a lot of the dogs, especially dogs that have extensive um, button boards, are really pretty familiar with the modeling, right? So this
Hmm.
is something that is certainly not foreign to them.
For sure. And we also do nose work, so I can bring some of those essential oil scents out there and put hides in
Love
different
it.
places to also encourage him to go find it is our cue. So we can do that as well, and get some
I love
practice
that.
in.
That's a
That's
great
great.
idea to just get the behavior started in that new environment or that new context.
Yeah. And then we had more than a couple of other ideas. We had plenty of other ideas about how we could do some more enrichment around the house. Um,
Yeah.
and learning things the way like Rico and Chaser learned things. Um, I'm forgetting the term for it right now off the top of my head. Um, uh,
Concept training.
yeah, concept training, um,
Hmm.
and learning new things via a concept. And could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so whether it's concept training or any other kind of training, one of the things that I think is always a good reminder for folks is that whether it's because it's 8 million degrees and you live in Arizona in the summer, or because your dog has an injury or you're maybe under the weather, um, there are going to be those days where exercise is challenging for folks. And so having other ways that we can provide novelty, reinforcement, stimulation for our animals is really, really helpful. And so I had suggested coming up with new training opportunities. And here he has kind of the basics, right? Sit and down and place and whatever. And we're not talking about that. That's okay. That's totally great to work on. And I want to encourage folks to work on that. But what we're talking about here is essentially using the training framework, right? Which might look like you get your treat pouch out and you put your clicker on, and we're going to work together and we're going to have this dialogue, right? We're going to have the type of dialogue that occurs in this sort of framework, and to use that to set up novel opportunities, right? So one of the things that I talk about that a lot of trainers like to refer to is 101 things to do with a box, right?
Yeah.
And I think there it doesn't really matter what we do with the box. It's that we have something new to do. We have a new prop. We have a new behavior, but we have something novel that we can offer the animal to do.
And I just dropped a link to my link tree where the resources list to all of the resources that Dianne provided me, including 101 things to do with a box, are in my link tree. If you are interested in that concept training. And also, for those of you that are in Bastion's book club, we read The Happiest Dog on the Block, which has tons of great enrichment ideas in it. So that link is also in that resource guide as well. They're all, some of them might be paid resources, others are free, but it is a great resource list if you are looking for new and novel things to do with your dog. So thanks so much for helping me put that together, Dianne.
Yeah, there are a few things in there that were paid. So, for example, things that you can do, the concept training that we were talking about. Ken Ramirez, who's the executive vice president of Karen Pryor Clicker Training, which is where I was certified, offers a couple of different courses that folks could take if they're looking for like smart enrichment, different types of ways to reinforce your dog, or sorry, smart reinforcement, and then also some concept training and those types of courses. So a little bit different than like a how to train. This is more of a how to train these sort of concepts, or how to train, right and left, and these modifier cues and different things like that. So I think that was mostly just to provide people with some ideas if I think people can get in a rut, and we just sort of, we pull out the treat pouch and we're like, okay, let me, kind of run through the basics of things that And so I think that since we're looking for ways to inject novelty into, this sort of enrichment plan, having some ideas for new, fun, novel things that we can teach our animals can be really helpful when we're sort of stuck in a rut or short on ideas. What could I work on today? And so hopefully that is helpful. And then there was also, I think I had provided like Emily's channel, the Kiko Pup
Hmm.
channel, a lot of really great like tricks and different fun behaviors. I think the important thing to remember is that the training doesn't necessarily need to be like an obedience behavior, right? I think that, even if it's something as fun as I saw actually one of my KPA colleagues, Allie, who's also here in Phoenix, saw her dog taking laundry out of the dryer and putting it into the basket. And I think I sent that video to you, Robin, because I just thought it
Yeah.
was so, so
As
cute.
long as there's
But
no socks, we're good.
total Spirit agrees with you. She's totally in that boat. Um, Yeah, it doesn't have to be something that's necessarily for a purpose or for, obedience training. It can be something that's fun, that's lighthearted, that allows you and the dog to spend time together. And most importantly, it's allowing the dog to do something. They're either contacting novel reinforcers or they're enabled to do new and novel behaviors.
Yeah, we're super excited. We signed up for Nina and Flounder's ballet course.
Oh,
She has a ballet master class. Dogs and cats are welcome, probably other creatures as well. Nina doesn't discriminate. I just threw a link to that in the chat as well. But if you want to see your pet do ballet like Flounder does with Nina, definitely check out her master class. We're going to give that a try. That'll be new and novel for Bert. He loves training, he loves learning. So we're super excited for that. And then,
yeah, that sounds really fun. I think that'll be
yeah,
great.
yeah. And hopefully his ileosis will be in a better place before class gets started. Um,
Yeah,
and with that being said, we discussed a little earlier adding a new button, and also as we were prepping for the call, and one of the things we thought of was maybe like a new or a surprise me or like same or different combination of buttons. How would you think about maybe introducing? I think for same and different, I would probably leverage treats and just give him the same treat and say same, 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 and then give a different treat and say different if I went with same and different. But for new or like surprise me, how might you introduce that button?
yeah. And I definitely think those are great options. And then I also think we can look at as we're going through the sniff spots or the different types of enrichment that we were providing or these novel training games, right? If we're noticing that there's, sort of a pattern of the animal really enjoying those things or seemingly wanting those things, then that might be a good indicator to us that that's something that we can name, we can label, and we can give it a button, right? How I would introduce a new button, probably I would start with a framework, right? So it might be something that we start with in the training framework, for example. So we were just kind of talking about that. And then let's say that we were going to do 101 things to do with the box. So we're going to start
Hmm.
at like the first one, right? Um, and I would probably, I mean, we on our board have a training button, like that means
As do we,
we're going to
yeah.
do clicker training, right? It means we're going to sort of set up the clicker training picture, right? Um, and that's what that means. So I might start modeling like new training, right? And so we're going to do a new activity within that particular framework. So it's a pretty abstract concept, right? So, and then I would also be mindful of other opportunities that you can capture newness, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I do model that word vocally. So we want folks to remember that we can be vocally modeling even if we haven't necessarily added the button to the board yet. And so times that I will model the word new for Scarlett would be like if we get a new toy. So let's say
Hmm.
we go to Petco or wherever it is and we pick out a new toy, right? So I might model like, this is a toy, right? But this is a new toy. Like
Right.
this is right. There's some sort of signifier that's special about this one, right? Um, if I have multiple dogs and different dogs have different kibble, right? So, okay, I can model that this is a new food, right? You're going to have some of somebody else's food, right? Um,
Right.
I think that those are all ways that we can be vocally modeling um, that concept. And as long as it's something that works for you and the animal, that's fine. And of course, with these types of concepts, I don't expect, as I talked about in the beginning, we are constantly co-creating meaning for these words with our animal learner because we are the only one or one of maybe a handful of people who communicate with the animal.
Hmm.
So I don't expect that we're going to like teach new and then within 3 days they're going to have that down and I can just apply that, you know,
Right. You
to
you can
anything and it's just going to be
generalize it.
this
Yeah.
sort of automatic. Exactly. It's something that we're constantly modeling. We're constantly um, generalizing. Really, that's what we're doing.
I guess I'm gonna have to take him to a lot of new sniff spots.
There you go. Sure.
Yeah.
Buy a lot of new
Uh,
toys.
yeah.
Scarlett would like that.
You
She thinks that's a great plan.
Or start getting Heather to send me her recipes for topples. New topple
Yeah,
recipe
perfect. Heather is the queen of topple recipes. Absolutely need to check that out.
for sure. Yeah, if you need a topple inspiration, check out Heather's page at Cinna Speaks for sure. Um, yeah, awesome. I think that we have covered a lot. Is there any final thoughts that you have to sort of close this out, Diane?
Um, you know, I think my final thought is to just reiterate that the answers are so often in the environment. And so we always want to bring it back to that. And we want to start there. We want to start sort of our exploration there. And when we have um, issues, we want to examine the environment and look at the environment because the environment so often holds the answers for us, right? So behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. Behavior always happens contingent on the environment, this big broad idea of the environment. And so when we are kind of lost for where to go, we're confused about why behavior is happening, we're looking for solutions, we're looking for ideas, the answers are almost always in the environment.
Yeah, I think my local trainer often says behavior is information. And I think that's, words to live by.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just some final thoughts. I'm going to be starting a new series called Doodle Dares, and I'll be posting a new enrichment idea at some to be determined frequency. Hopefully every couple of days or so with every new idea that I've done, whether it be from the books, the concept training, 101 things to do with a box, going to a sniff spot, and you catching me out there sniffing the bushes with Bert, just to
I see I was
inspire
waiting.
just to inspire everyone to try something new with your dog. And I'll keep you posted with the results and how his button presses change over time if they do, and where we are with things. So thank you everybody for joining. Really appreciate your time, Diane and Heather. And Heather, if you have any parting words, feel free to share. Sorry to put you on the
I
spot.
think, yeah, I'm like now I'm on the spot. But yeah, I don't actually have any great things to add to this. I feel like Diane covered everything so beautifully that I was just like nodding along in the corner.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate the reinforcement, Heather. It's always nice to have wonderful people to nod along. So thank you.
awesome. All right, thanks everybody for being here. We appreciate you, and keep your eye out for Doodle Dares. All right, bye bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much.